Hey, what's up? It's alchemist.camp, where we learn Elixir by building things. And today we're going to set up a deployment system for Phoenix app, or actually for any Elixir app. And this deployment system is going to have three really nice features. First, it's not going to require shackling our app inside some sort of Docker container that would break hot code swapping and break some of the uniquely powerful networking abilities of Elixir. Second, there won't be any third-party dependencies, no third-party platform like Heroku or Elixir. As convenient as they might be, we're just going to be using Elixir and plain Unix tools. And third, it's not going to be a pain to use once it's set up. We're not going to have to SSH into the server every time we deploy. We're just going to have a command line process to build and deploy from our local box. Let's do it. First thing is, I'll SSH into the server I set up on DigitalOcean last time. As you may notice, I've configured it to use SSH keys, so a login is not required. Next thing is, we'll install Erlang. And I've got this open in a browser. We're just going to wget from the source. And this is the standard Debian install. And once that's done, we'll install it using the Debian package manager. And we'll have to update. And install. And install Elixir. Next is the package manager. Next up, we'll install Phoenix. And once again, we'll just get a link and paste that in. Okay, here we are. Yes. They put the dollar in there. I don't know why, but whatever. Yes, we'll install everything. Excellent. There were a few rough edges in getting set up that weren't covered in the install guides, so I just figured them out off screen and I'll go over them now. First was this Perl warning, setting locale failed. And this is because the language and the LCL are completely unset. So the way I dealt with that was by echoing it to etc/default/locale. So we'll have to sudo echo language equals en_us.utf8, and then echo that to etc/default/locale. And even sudoing permissions denied. So in that case, what we'll have to do is sudo in as root. Then I'll copy that in. So sudo -u for user, root I for interactive. And now as root, we'll execute the same command. Okay, that's updated. We got one more. So we'll also echo. Got one more. So we'll also echo lc_all equals, and then once again it's going to be en_us.utf-8, and this will also go to etc default locales. Locale without the s. All right, now we should be able to see that this has been properly set. Locale-a. Okay, looks good. For some strange reason, Ubuntu 16.04 installs an old version of Postgres, like a fairly old one actually, that doesn't even work with Ecto because it doesn't support all the types that Ecto supports. So we've got to install a newer version of Postgres. You can find the way to do this. Install Postgres 9.6 on Ubuntu 16.04. You can see it autocomplete here. There was an Ask Ubuntu column that has the instructions. So you can just highlight all of this and paste it into the command line like so. And it's also going to be really convenient if we have Node set up. And for some reason, this version of Ubuntu's Node is called Node.js instead of Node. All right, and then we'll get npm as well. And since that version of Node was called Node.js for some reason, I think there was a conflict on this version of Ubuntu. We're going to link that up with Node instead of Node.js so that Phoenix can find it. User bin Node.js to user bin Node. Right. So now we should be able to just run node as so. Right, it's USR, not USER. So we'll fix that link. Okay, that's just ancient. Let's see if we can get a newer one. Debian and Ubuntu. All right. All right. There we go. Got a reasonable version of Node. We can finally install a Phoenix app. This is just going to be a throwaway app, so we'll call it YOLO4. Yes, we'll create all the things. All right, it's built. We don't have a Postgres user set up yet, so let's both set the config and get that user created. So our config is in, we'll do dev for now, config/dev.exs. There should be a database block down at the bottom. There we go. We're going to say username YOLO dev. And password will also be YOLO dev. Database we can just leave as YOLO4_dev. Then we'll log in as Postgres. Sudo -i-u. We'll start up a PSQL console. And then the first thing we'll do is create a database. Phoenix could do this, but we don't really want to give YOLO dev the ability to create databases on our production server. YOLO4_dev is what it's called, I believe. Then we'll create user YOLO dev with password YOLO dev. Grant all privileges on database YOLO4_dev to YOLO dev. That should do it. So with the database created, we should be able to mix ecto. Migrate. There are no migrations, but we'll just see the thing does not barf on us. And let's start the server. All right, so we can load up. This server is on port 4000, so we can go to Alchemist .camp, port 4000. And there's nothing here, and that's because the firewall is blocking it. So let's open up that port. Whoa. Okay. Left control C. Right control is the host key on this virtual machine. Is UFW. Let's look at the status first. Yeah, that's pretty standard stuff we've got open. Now we will allow 4000. And let's start up the server again. So it looks like all is good here. Let's quit this server. So we've got everything set up and basically working. Let's look at our production settings. So it's going to be in config/prod.secret.exs. We're not going to use Postgres. We're actually just going to use YOLO dev. That's fine. We can make it YOLO for prod database. And we're going to set all of this up in a local project. And that local project is going to use Edeliver, and it will send itself up to the server. So first step is replicating that project locally. So we will go to our trusty Visual Studio Code, pop open a terminal, and create basically an identical copy of this YOLO for Phoenix project. And let me bump up the font size a bit. All right, let's open up that new project in a new window. So we can see it here. And first thing we've got to do is get the dependencies, which we'll add to our mix file. We're going to need Edeliver, and we'll get version 1.4.3 of that. And then we'll also get Distillery. And that one is just version 1.4. So save that, and then we'll get our dependencies. Now, in order to actually use Edeliver, we're going to have to configure our project. So we'll go into prod.exs. We'll set the host to alchemist.camp. Then we're going to add a couple of lines. First one is server true, and this just means we boot the web server when we start up. And the next one is code reloader false, and we don't want that because this is production. If we look at the bottom of this file, there is no database info because we get that from our prod.secret.exs. So let's take a look at that. Here is the secret key that we can't store in Git, and I wouldn't ever show on screen if it were a real project, at least not intentionally. And here are database settings. We're going to use the same user as we're using on the server for development, just YOLO dev and YOLO dev, and we'll keep the YOLO 4_prod database that's set up on the server. Okay, next thing is getting this file to the server. Easiest way is probably just with SCP, and I haven't installed the OpenSSH tools for Windows 10 yet, so we'll open up Bash, and I've made the font gigantic so you can see what I'm doing. Use SCP or secure copy to copy config/prod.secret.exs to alchemist.camp, and that's going to go in home/alchemist/YOLO 4 config, and this is totally arbitrary. I just decided to put all the configs in my home directory under the name of the project _config and prod.secret.exs. Yes. Okay, so we also need to update one other thing, and that would be the SSH config. So this is going to have to be done on both the Windows side and the virtual host side if we want to be able to do this conveniently from both. So I'll just open that in VI from here. This is pretty simple. I'm just going to add another line for alchemist.camp. And oh, that's a bit much of an indent for me. I'm going to set the tab space equal to 2. Much better. Host name alchemist.camp. And I'm going to set a default user, which will be Alchemist. So on my own drive, or on my own computer, I'm Shelma, but it's going to be Alchemist on the server. So I'm going to specify Alchemist here. And the identity file is going to be the same as the others. So I'll just yank that and paste it there. So now that copy ought to work, except the directory doesn't exist. So that's pretty easy to fix. We'll just SSH in. And now it won't require any sort of user at before it. We'll just SSH and then the host. All right, and make directory YOLO4 config. Try that copy again. Excellent. Okay, so it's copied over, and we can get out of git bash. And we're going to run mix release init. This will create a configuration file for us. Okay, the example is in relconfig.exs. Got a whole new directory here. And here's our production block. This says to include the Erlang runtime system and not to include the source code. And I think we'll just leave that as it is in both cases, but we're going to add an output directory. Okay, so this will be where the built project goes. Unfortunately, we're going to have to make the config for Edeliver ourselves. So I'm just going to make a new directory here called .deliver and a file called config. In this file, we need to specify a number of things about our project, starting with its name, and then some information about the machine where it's going to be built. And it's going to be alchemist.camp is going to be the host, and the user is just going to be alchemist. And then the location where it's going to be built is home/alchemist/YOLO4 build. Then we need to specify basically the same stuff except for production. And in our case, we're going to be building and producing the app on the same server. So it's just going to be production host, production user, same as build host and build user. Then finally, we have to say where we're going to deliver the built release. We're going to put that in home/alchemist/YOLO4 release. Now Edeliver has nearly everything it needs to deliver the release. It just needs to know where we put that prod.secret.exs. And there is a hook called pre-erlang get and update deps. And this hook will run exactly when you think it would from its name. One moment. It's control comma, I believe. There we go. Editor.tab size 4. That's a horrible preference. Who would do that? Since I did a fresh install of Windows while trying to debug what was going on with Nanobox, I lost all my preferences. Tab size, there we go, and it's going to be 2. There are going to be more preferences to be replaced in the future. All right. Local prod secret path is /home/alchemist. I think I put it in YOLO for config /prod.secret.exs. And if target mix environment is production, sync remote, and we'll link prod secret path to build at config/prod.secret.exs. Phi to close the if, and let's indent each of those one more. Okay, so basically what this is going to do is each time we deploy, or each time we deliver a release, I should say, we will check and see if the environment is production. If it's not, we don't do anything special. If it is production, then we link our prod secret path to this build at, which is up here. So YOLO for _build config/prod.secret.exs. So it will yank the prod secret out of here, and it will put it into config/prod.secret.exs along with the rest of the app that has just been built at the build at path. Now with that, we also need to have a Git repository because Edeliver relies completely on Git for delivering the releases. So git init and git add dot. We'll commit our initial project. YOLO. All right, let's see if we can deliver it. Deps is not recognized as an internal or external command, operable path, or batch file. What? That error message sucks. Well, it looks like it really is just a poor error message, and others have run into this problem before. Apparently EXRM supports Windows, but the author of Edeliver explicitly chose not to, which is, it's really a shame. This kind of thing just makes the ecosystem a bit more hostile to Windows users, especially newbies. So I'm gonna post that on GitHub. Yeah, if we want to grow the community, it's not a good thing to just say either buy an expensive computer or install a virtual machine or off. Pardon the blunt language, but that's what I think. All right, let's see if this works with git bash. to same directory, prog alchemist camp / yellow4 mix deliver build release. Deps is not recognized as an internal or external command operable program or batch file. I have to say that's really disappointing. I know open source is something where people are doing it largely out of a labor of love, and they're spending their own time on it, and it is more work to support more people, but just the whole attitude of throwing the very largest group of users under the bus is not something I like. Now, admittedly, there aren't that many Windows users on Elixir, and that's because it's not supported. It's kind of like Crystal is another good example. Like, they don't support Windows at all, whereas the Elixir language does support Windows pretty well. It's just a lot of the library authors, I've seen this more than one time. Like CMark is a good example. That's a markdown library that's written in C and is very full-featured. It's in use in lots of different platforms. There are lots of different wrappers around it. Like, there's a Python wrapper for it, which is, works on pretty much everyone's machine. The Elixir wrapper for it breaks, or at least the most popular Elixir wrapper for it, breaks Windows support. And last I checked, it didn't even say anything about it in the README. So the experience that most newbies are going to have with Elixir is they'll start off and everything will work okay at first, installing the language and getting the the core things set up. But then as soon as they need to hash a password or deploy their app or do anything, their odds of running into some library intentionally doesn't support their OS, even though Elixir does, even though the stuff they built on it does, and then gives an error message like deps is not recognized as an internal or external command operable program or batch file. I mean, if it were me of, say, 7 years ago, and I were just really interested in making a web server, and I read about Elixir and thought it was really cool, and I ran into this, I would just be like, well, okay, I have no idea what's going on. And then if like the next thing you say is go set up a VM, well, I mean, you've got my video from earlier in the series where I set up a VM, and so hopefully that's lowering the bar or lowering the barriers to newcomers a bit, but it still kind of sucks. I mean, yeah, I don't want to rant on it too much, but I find that whole thing really, really disappointing. All right. I think I'm gonna have to set up the SSH config as well. SSH config host alchemist.camp host name alchemist.camp user alchemist, and copy that file. Make sure that works. SSH alchemist.camp. It does. All right. Media sf prog / alchemist camp / yellow4. Mix edeliver upgrade production. Cancel that because we don't want to upgrade production. We want to start production. Cancel that because we don't want to upgrade production. We want to start production. Cancel that because we're not upgrading, we're just deploying. Edeliver, deploy, release to production. I don't have hex. I guess I haven't used it yet from this VM. Save that. Save that, and then cd into media to get the shared drive, sfprog/alchemist-camp and yellow4. And now let's give this one more try. Mix, edeliver, build, release. Wow, it doesn't parse line breaks either. Okay, so we've got to get rid of those characters at the end of each line, since Windows line breaks and Linux line breaks are different. I'll just make a macro for that. So I'll hit Q to start the macro. I'll name my macro D. And let's see, this macro's got to go to the end of the line. So $, X to delete, J to go down to the next line. And I'll hit Q to stop recording. Okay, and then to run this macro repeatedly, I'll just type in a number first. Looks like about 15 lines. So 15 @ to recall the macro, then D. That was almost all of it. So 2 @ D, and file is edited. You know, actually, Visual Studio Code actually does this. Save the file. I bet it's got them in it again. You can just change it to LF. This is actually the first time I've had use for this function. Oh, okay, so more than one way to do it. Okay, other than fixing that, let me do one last check. Oh, this should be build at, not built at. And that part looks good. Anything in here? We're gonna have Nginx doing the proxying for us, so we don't even have to set anything up for SSL. We don't need to load from the system environment though. And we should set the internal port. So we're going to be using HTTP and port 4000 internally. Okay, and we'll check the prod secret. All of this looks reasonable as well. All right, let's save everything and give it a shot. Add everything to Git if I didn't already, and just do an amend commit. Oh, Jesus. Not nano. For something that was made to try to be easy, I've never found some, well, I haven't put much time into figuring out what's going on, but it doesn't seem like it wins at anything. Like, it's not easy, and it's not powerful either, from what I can tell. How did I change that last time? It was sudo update alternatives config editor. Oh, we don't have the real vim option here, just the tiny. Oh, that's fine. I've only been using core VI stuff anyway. Okay, so now do that. Commit. Let's see if we can actually make a release. Without fat fingering the enter key. That's not good. Let's see here. Okay, so it compiled fine. It was just in generating the release there was a problem. Rel config exs, line 40. That looks okay. The error before set. And oh, it's not a list, it's just a bunch of things to be executed. All right, fingers crossed. I think it'll actually work this time. Release build of YOLO 4 was successful. All right, now let's send it to the production server. Missing the following configs: production hosts. Really? We do have a production host. It should be production hosts. How strange. Build host, production hosts. I guess there can be more than one, although I only have one. All right, I'll add that S, and we will do this again until it works. All right, we're deploying the release of YOLO 4 app to production hosts with the S. It's authorizing them, and I bet if we look in our other terminal where the upload is occurring, we can see what's going on. Let's go to YOLO 4 release. Wow, and there's a bit of lag in the typing, which means it's probably using up a lot of bandwidth. Just a big tar there. It is deployed. All right. So now that we've built the release and we've deployed it to production, the next step is to actually start the server. And that is mix edeliver start production. And this should be fine because this will just start up on port 4000. Let me pull that back up. And there's nothing running there now. And there it is. It's our very default YOLO 4 Phoenix app. Let's change this app now so that it shows the alchemist.camp website, the static one that we've already made. So right now we have the web and the application. So we're going to look at the web part of it, and we'll look at endpoint.ex, and we're going to add a file here. As well as robots.txt, we'll add an index.html. And this is from static. And then we'll add to priv static. Actually, we'll add to asset static and just make an index.html file here. Save that. And then after restarting the server, endpoint should render index.html as this. And then in our router, this line should actually never happen. Let's try this locally and just make sure that it makes sense. iex.bat, since we're in PowerShell, -s mix phoenix.server. And we'll go to localhost 4000. We've got to move the logo over as well, I suppose. So we'll go up to the assets, actually the assets / images. Got that open there. And I'm going to copy in the two images that I think will be fairly likely to be using here. They're a larger logo and a smaller one. They're both .pngs. I'm going to make the smaller one the primary. So instead of using this long name, actually I can just use the long name in the index file. So copy that. Then there should be an index.html. There we go. Hit Alt-Z to put all that huge long CSS line on one line without wrapping it. And here's our images. Link .png. All right, let's have a look and see if that loads it up. Probably have to mix digest. I don't have to stop the server to do that though. Mix phoenix.digest. That will copy our static assets from asset/static to priv/static. And it should bust the cache as well. Yep, there we go. All right, so that's our logo. One minor problem though is this is all under index, and if we went to the base path, we get this this default Phoenix page, which we don't really want. So as we set up in our endpoint, index.html will get rendered statically, but we've got to have a way for the router to know to do that. Right now, when we get a slash, we just go to the page controller and index. And in endpoint, since we've already got an endpoint here that's a whole directory, you may recall from building the Alchemist camp, if you watched any of that playlist, when you're dealing with a Cowboy server, you can set up a static endpoint for a directory or for a file, but you can't match the same to both. So you can't both get everything under the root directory and have a rule for the root directory itself with nothing else, at least not very conveniently. So what we're going to do is we're just going to use the Phoenix templating system or the Phoenix controller and router system to do this. It'll be slightly less efficient, but we're still talking like really fast to render. So we've got a page controller that dishes it off to index. Let's look at that controller. So it just says render con index.html, and that index.html is this template. So there are a couple things we could do. We could just copy the whole HTML file in here, or we could have the controller do a redirect. So that would be like this. So now when we hit 4000, or we hit the base path that just redirects to index, that puts this ugly index.html into our URL, and we're also sending a 300 redirect each time, which well, Google probably doesn't like, amongst other things, so it's not the ideal way to do it. We could put some logic into our endpoint, just like add a plug in here that would turn any path that's just the root path to /index.html, and that's actually not a bad way to go. I actually ended up experimenting with these options a little bit, and my favorite is the plug in endpoint.ex. It's the most performant, it's also the cleanest, and there aren't any static asset paths that you need to worry about in your controllers or anything like that. And because of this experimentation, when I deploy at the end of this video, it's going to be version 0.0.4. Okay, this is a little bit more of a pain than I had initially realized. The problem is this directory structure is only going to work when we're running Phoenix with mix. And if we try to use static path, that's also going to have some problems because index.html is at the base. So I think, contrary to my initial plan, I actually am just going to do a redirect, and it's So what we'll do is so instead of index.html, which would use the template, we're going to redirect the con to /index.html. That /index.html will go to the endpoint.ex before it even hits the router. Then plug static will catch it here, and that will be that. It should just render as is, and it won't matter whether if we're in production or if we're building locally with Mix. So that works. Not a huge fan of the 304, but it's not a gigantic problem for the time being. And let's add this to Git. You know what? There's a better way to do this. Instead of doing the redirect in the router, instead of doing the redirect in the controller, which requires going through the router first, let's just handle it in the con directly. So I'm going to leave this as is. We're not even going to need the index. And inside endpoint.ex, we'll make a redirect con. And that will prevent us from even needing to hit the router or the controller. And everything will be just a little bit faster. So handle index. And we're just going to match on plug.con where path info is an empty array, which basically means we are at the base path and we don't care what the options are. We'll just convert this directly to plug.con where the path info is updated to index.html. And I guess this function is not going to be a one-liner. There we go. It was just an auto insert from the editor. Oh, we've got to have another version of it too. Handle index. And it's going to take a con, and we'll throw away the options again, and we'll just do con. And then before every single request, we will use that plug. All right, let's give this a shot. I'm going to restart the server. Let's reload the page, and status code 304. It's a 200. All right. Good enough. Let's bump the version again and deploy one more time. Now let's use Edeliver to upgrade production. And when you use an upgrade command, you have to have a higher version. So we've got version 001 already. What we've saved in Git is 002, so we can upgrade that. And it should be 0 downtime if all works well. And while that is upgrading, we've got to update the rules in Nginx to handle the proxy. And so that's going to be in sites available / whatever the name of your site is. Got to set two things. One is this upstream block. I've set it with the server of localhost port 4000, since port 1000 is where the upstream connection is coming from in Phoenix. And then in the location block, we need to set proxy headers to forward everything. So we're forwarding the HTTP headers, and we're letting it know what the host is and also that it has been forwarded. And then this next two set of commands are for forwarding WebSockets, which we're not even using here, but many Phoenix apps will, and this one probably will in the future. And then proxy pass at the bottom is, actually I'm not sure what that does, so I'll probably look that up after this video, but this is what you need to set up in Nginx. I should say, first of all, I'm not an Nginx expert by any means. I've pretty much just used it for doing this, exactly this, like proxying the front, and then a little bit for WordPress configuration here and there. So we save that, and then let's look at what is open on the firewall right now. UFW status. After this upgrade is completed, we're not going to need port 4000 anymore. So assuming everything is okay, I'll close that port off. The build looks okay, and we'll restart, or we'll reload the server. Port 4000, okay. How about not at port 4000? Okay, that looks good as well. Let's go to just HTTP. Redirects to HTTPS. Excellent. Okay, so now would be a good time to close access to port 4000. So we'll sudo firewall delete allow 4000. And now it's only open to Nginx and OpenSSH. And we don't even have to allow Nginx full. We could just have the firewall open only to HTTPS, but it's a nicer experience for someone to try to load HTTP and get redirected to HTTPS than to try to load HTTP and just not be able to load the page at all. So we'll leave it open like this. So that pretty much wraps it up. Yeah, we've got Nginx set up, we've got the proxying set up, we've got a deployment system working. There were a few rough patches, like not being able to use it on Windows, like needing to know about what to include in Git and what not to, dealing with static assets. But now that that's been dealt with, it's going to be really easy to deploy further releases and upgrades to this project, and even doing another project won't be nearly as difficult as this one was. I'd also like to make quick mention that I've chatted with the Edeliver authors a little bit after I started doing this video. So I haven't recorded all of this in one day because I had some other things going on as well. But the long and the short of it is they're not Windows users, but same as me, they want to see Elixir grow. And if you are a Windows user and you're experienced with Elixir and you want to dig in and figure out what it takes to improve the Windows support for this module, it shouldn't be too hard. Like, the design is fairly modular, and the maintainers are more than open to working with you. So if you do, like, that would be amazing, and I will totally do a follow-up video that's probably more streamlined and ultimately more useful than this one, because I'll be more used to the process, it'll be faster, and won't have to deal with virtual boxes. I will do that. So yeah, I hope someone figures it out. And just a quick clarification for any library maintainers or anyone whose software I have struggled with and gotten frustrated and banged my fist on the table and said, why does this not work, or why is it not supported on Windows? nothing personal there. I totally understand open source developers are basically putting forth a labor of love for free to help the world. And I certainly don't want to diminish any of that. I'm super appreciative of all the work everyone's doing. I'm just, same as anyone, I want to get stuff to compile and get stuff to work, and it's really frustrating, especially if the limitation is just using what's still the most popular platform. And maybe I'm particularly sensitive to it because several years ago, when I wasn't really much of a developer, I was trying to learn and working with Ruby on Rails, and it was incredibly hostile to a newbie on Windows. And people were telling me to set up a virtual box, and that used to be harder then than it is now. So yeah, it was enough of an unpleasant experience that I actually just didn't spend my free time trying to learn how to do web development for the next few years. And it wasn't until much later that I eventually did get into it, and then incidentally did end up getting familiar with using Macs and Linux and so on. But anyway, if you found this video useful and you want to see more like it, hit subscribe. And if you want to see something different, then leave a comment below and let me know what you're looking for. Till next time, code on.